Alright, so here's the situation. I'm currently pulled over south of Buffalo, Wyoming. I'm seeing snow-capped mountains that I've driven to for the first time in my life. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop in Buffalo and then get an idea of where I'm going to go, because there's several different ways that I could cross over the Bighorn National Forest and then wonder if it's worth it to maybe camp in them and then go to Yellowstone the next day. We'll find out. And then I need to make a phone call to see how late Yellowstone's ranger stations are going to be open. So I'm going to figure that out, heading into town right now, get something to eat for lunch. I forgot, it was mountain time, so I accidentally was like an hour fast on my motorcycle. So it's 12:30 right now instead of 1:30. That's pretty good.
The land that I'm passing through is known as the Powder River Basin. This region is today known for supplying 40% of the coal in the United States alone. By comparison, 11% comes from West Virginia, where the state rock is coal. Dozens of coal power plants across the country are powered by the Powder River Basin. Before the Industrial Revolution, however, this basin was fought over for many different reasons. It was under constant conflict between the Crow, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. Around the time the United States began its expansion over the Mississippi, Central Plains tribes were also expanding westward. These tribes were the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Lakota. The Powder River region was held by Crow tribes, who were Siouan in language, but a Western Plains tribe. The Central Plains tribes were attracted to the area because it had some of the best remaining buffalo hunting ranges in the Great Plains. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 gave the Crow the Powder River region, but the Central Plains tribes ignored it, forcing them out in an aggressive, expansionist move. Over the course of the 1850s, vigorous campaigns by the Central Plains tribes forced the Crow out of the region entirely. In 1863, right around the end of the Dakota War in Minnesota, boomtowns such as Virginia City and Bannack were growing. Gold had been discovered in what was the Western Dakota Territory. A man by the name of John Bozeman created the Bozeman Trail that connected the Gold Rush region of Montana to the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail was the main route westward to the Pacific, and potential prospectors needed a safe way to trek north that wouldn't cross over desert or mountains. It also came from the southeast, where the majority of pioneers were coming from. The Bozeman Trail used many north-south routes that the Crow and other native tribes have been using since prehistoric times. Today, the Bozeman Trail runs along Interstates 25 and 90. For its first few years, the trail was used by thousands of prospectors looking to find fortune in the Rocky Mountains. This caused a competition for resources along the trail, which ran right through the central tribes' buffalo hunting lands. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho conducted raids on the settlers that passed along the trail. After the end of the Civil War in 1866, the United States focused its energy toward westward expansion with the political belief of manifest destiny in tow. This meant that the white expansion into areas of rich resources, such as the gold mines of Montana, was imminent. 5 months after the end of the Civil War, the Powder River Expedition began. It was a military operation run by the U.S. government to secure the Bozeman Trail and create a region of safe passage through hostile native territory. The Central Plains tribes were persistent in holding the Powder River region. There were several battles that left the U.S. soldiers weary and broken. The expedition was deemed a failure as it failed to secure the region from the Central Plains tribes. Another attempt at a treaty was made. The United States and Crow, who pitched the terms, knew that the treaty would not work without the consent of a Lakota war chief known as Red Cloud. Red Cloud was respected among the decentralized Central Plains tribes for his active militant resistance against the Crow and United States. As it turns out, he was one of, if not the most successful Native American leader in all conflicts the U.S. had against Native tribes. Red Cloud was called into Fort Laramie, the largest fort in the region, for another attempt at a treaty. The terms stated that the Central Plains tribes were to be paid annuity payments in exchange for free passage through the Bozeman Trail. Red Cloud and his constituents, however, were no stranger to the U.S. government, and they knew they were not to be trusted on this promise. 3 years earlier, Dakota tribes were exiled to the Eastern Dakota Territory after a war in Minnesota in 1862. Many had spent time in a concentration camp in Minneapolis, while others escaped with their lives after the closing of the Sioux Reservation. The Dakota had no doubt spread word that the U.S. government was not good for their payments. The war was a result of the United States' inability or refusal to hold up their end of treaties and bargains. Knowing the U.S. wasn't good on their word, Red Cloud refused to sign, and the raids on the Bozeman Trail continued. To the United States, this meant war. Another expedition was commissioned by Colonel Henry B. Carrington. He was to march 700 soldiers up the Bozeman Trail and establish forts. Many of the soldiers were veterans from the Civil War. They established forts all along the trail in an effort to secure it. Red Cloud and his warriors attacked every caravan they could find on the trail, some assaults ending in huge U.S. military losses. The Fetterman Fight was the hardest on the U.S. It was an ambush set up by Crazy Horse, a prominent Lakota leader and strategist. A Lakota decoy party had coaxed U.S. troops into a trap where the entire regiment was killed. It was the largest Great Plains military loss in U.S. history up until the Battle of Little Bighorn. The U.S. knew that the battle to secure the Bozeman Trail would be expensive and costly. At that time, the U.S. military was more concerned with guarding the Transcontinental Railroad than it was securing an alternate, more bloody route to the Montanan mines. Another treaty was attempted, and this time the U.S. capitulated. This time, the U.S. government agreed to abandon all existing forts along the trail and gave the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes the Great Sioux Reservation, which included rights to the Powder River country. All tribes agreed, and the U.S. abandoned all forts along the road, which were prominently burned by the warriors under Red Cloud. Red Cloud was the only Plains tribe leader to win a war against the United States. The treaty created the Great Sioux Reservation, which would last until gold was discovered in the Black Hills, causing the Great Sioux War 8 years later. Episode 3 of this season is on that conflict. During the Great Sioux War, Red Cloud acted more as a pacifist, while Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull continued to fight against the U.S. As one of the oldest Lakota leaders, he could see that the native tribes that he once led could not go on forever against the abundant population of the United States. He became a representative of his people in Washington, working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and resisting acts and laws that go against native interests. He settled in the Pine Ridge Reservation. After the assassination of Sitting Bull, Red Cloud invited Sitting Bull's cousin Spotted Elk to seek refuge in his reservation. Before reaching it, however, the U.S. government caught up to Spotted Elk and his band and slaughtered them at the massacre at Wounded Knee. Two Wheels, One Compass has an episode on this as well. Red Cloud was the most photographed Native American of the 19th century, with 128 known photos of him. He continued to advocate for Native American and white coexistence until his death in 1909, at the age of 87, which is very old for someone of his age and origin. He was the last living Native leader of the Sioux Wars of the Great Plains. One of his final quotes, still in defiance of the U.S., was, "They made us many promises, more than I can remember, but they kept one. They promised to take our land, and they took it."